Hello and welcome to season 2 of Quarantine with Fulbrighters. You liked our season 1 so much that we're back with another list of well accomplished Fulbrighters, and we're starting off with somebody who's doing phenomenal work in a field that I'm also really invested in, and I feel that is really the future. So for somebody who does that, will always be an inspiration for me. So we have Axa Khalid here with us. How are you doing, Axa?
Assalamu alaikum, Shahzad. I'm great. Thank you for the kind introduction and your passion for education.
Walaikum assalam. No, absolutely. And I'm going to start from where you started from. So you have a master's in technology in education from Vanderbilt University on a Fulbright. Is that right?
Yes, so the program I enrolled in was Learning Diversity and Urban Studies, but when I came back, I started working in technology.
That's amazing. So I'm actually curious about the program to begin with. Usually we start discussing people's work, but I'm genuinely very curious about the program because it sounds like something I would do.
You're right. So the program I enrolled in was not just for school teachers or school leaders or public or like education policy. It was a great mix of several things. And colleagues in my class, some of them went on to become football coaches. Some of them are doing programming in hospitals. People like me have come back to schools. So it was the program allowed for an environment where anyone and everyone who wants to do anything with education, be it any setting, they were able to do so. So the program allowed for that diversity that it sort of has the tagline of.
I think a lot of times when we think about education, especially in Pakistan or people who may not have gone to the US specifically, or even in a lot of international schools, or may not have had that exposure, they think about education in very pedantic terms that somebody will come into a class and give a lecture, whereas your program sounds a lot more interesting. So, what is the program like where people can graduate from that and go into football coaching? And again, we at times undermine things like sports, but sports, entertainment, theater can be great avenues of learning as well. So, what is about that program which gears people up for things like this?
So the advisor of the program has designed the program in such a way where they focus on creating spaces with intentional learning vibe. I'm not phrasing it correctly, but something in that space allows you to grow,
Hmm.
allows you to be very intentional about how you're thinking of learning. So in any work environment that you're in, you will be learning a set of skills. The way you learn those set of skills is, I think, what we were taught. How do you go on to create those spaces? How do you become more culturally relevant? How do you think of design, so to speak? What is normal? We talked about things as might sound so basic, about the seating arrangement, the type of chairs that should be in such an environment. Because so thinking about
What type of
diversity
chair
and
should they be?
now, for example, the standard chair that we have assumes that a person would have a certain height, certain weight,
Yeah.
would be right-handed or left-handed, not thinking of people who are differently abled, not thinking of a lot of other things, not thinking about weight. So the size of the chair on which you sit accommodates a certain body shape. So it was about the program was geared towards creating and sharpening our lens of equity and diversity to even such a detail. I think that allowed us all of my colleagues to grow in space in that manner and to envision how we would want to take this to the work environment we want to go and
I
work in.
absolutely agree. I think fat people like me are discriminated against everywhere. And it's about time we get together and talk about this discrimination as well. Chairs are not made for me. I'm not comfortable in those
No,
chairs.
but it's true. It's really true.
Yes, I've realized that it wasn't my fault that my learning was compromised. It was the chair's fault. So, um, so people who are listening who may not have the opportunity to go into a specific master's like yours, or there are a lot of teachers around Pakistan who may be listening. Are there any tips or advice you can give that they can make their classrooms into better learning spaces?
I think the first thing that I have learned, and I have, yeah, so the first thing I've learned is don't undermine the power of a discussion. So it's the when you say it's a learning space for you and someone else, and usually that someone else is in a greater number. So there's one teacher and maybe 20, 30 other students. Think of it as a combined space. It's not your space where you design and everyone comes in and follows. So start off with discussion of what are some ideas where everyone can make this a space where you come in to learn, you're happy, you want to come in and learn. So maybe just starting off with that, and also thinking about the fact, taking the so especially for teachers, taking your role very, very seriously. You as a teacher, you have the opportunity to inspire and get inspired by 30 or 20 individuals at one time. So taking that very seriously, and engaging in discussions. And the way I phrase that, getting inspired and inspiring. So it's not just going in and teaching, but also being taught by those individuals. So whenever you, so yeah, thinking,
I,
starting with discussion and lowering that authority hierarchy we have
I think
built into
you
our
said
mind.
something like this might sound very basic, but a lot of times these are these basic things which we don't place enough value in. So things like humility, it's not a value that a lot of importance is placed on when it comes to a teacher. For the teacher to have humility, to walk into a class and think I do not know everything and I can learn from these people. Unfortunately, especially in public schools in Pakistan, very few teachers have that quality to walk in with the idea that I'm also here to learn from all of these people and these people may have something to teach me.
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
So you've been doing a phenomenal work with TCF. For people who don't know, the Citizens Foundation is genuinely one of the great organizations that exist in Pakistan. Can you, for people who may not know, can you tell them a little bit about TCF?
So the Citizens Foundation was set up in 1995, and it was started off as a way to gear positive change through education. And 25 years later, it has around 16,052 schools. It teaches around I think, 266,000. I'm really bad with the
Wow.
thousands.
266,000.
Yes, 266,000 students all
Clearly, her
across
master's was
Pakistan.
not in math. So,
Yeah, and so yeah, it has a number of flagship schools with their design, and it has also adopted a lot of government schools in Punjab and Sindh.
so the specific project that you've been working on with TCF is the launch of this magazine that has been created. Can you
Yeah,
please speak
so
about the magazine?
it's really interesting, Shahzad. When I came back to Pakistan, I really wanted, I was thinking in terms of scale that I want to work
Mm.
with an organization where I'm able to reach a certain number I had in my head, that I want to reach this many people by the end of the year.
Which was
Um,
266,000.
no,
You had
no,
the
that's
number, you just didn't know what the number was.
in my head. I had something around
Okay.
2,000 or 3,000 because the previous year I had taught around 300 kids.
Wow.
So every year I set up a goal for scale in my head. When I applied to TCF, I applied for a manager for technology for learning unit.
Mm.
I joined in February, and March end the school closure.
Yeah.
And that's when TCF put together a team where they were thinking about distance learning solutions. I was part of that team, and we started looking for solutions. The first solution we came up with was starting a TV show that was aired at Tele Talim channel.
Okay.
And
In case you do
then
that
we
again and you need a host who's magnetic, who's charming, who knows a lot about education, is a Fulbright scholar, there are a lot of people which I can recommend.
Yeah, yeah, I'll keep that in mind. So the TV show, we knew that not everyone, especially in the communities that we reach, not everyone has a
Mm.
TV set at home. We were thinking about and researching several other solutions through which we could reach all of the students within TCF and even a wider community. Because students in our schools usually do not have access to the digital avenues accessible to other kids. We So we researched, we looked up radio educational programs, but even the reach of radio isn't that much in the communities we
Yeah.
operate. And that's when we thought of a good old a revival of magazines that we grew up like learning, but with a different edge. So our focus, a lot of our focus was on mitigating the social psychosocial impact of the pandemic on kids, because there was a lot unknown that was happening even for adults. But for kids, it must have been crazy, I assume. So we launched this print magazine. It's in Urdu. It's in Urdu. It has a few segments in English. It started as a bi-monthly magazine, but now it's a monthly magazine. We focus on foundational literacy, numeracy, and in the beginning, we were focusing on engagement and controlling dropout, and mental health, social emotional learning was a big component of that. Now that schools are open, we have also tried to include student voice in it, where students send submissions. It's not just the good old picture and a copied share or two, but it's also a lot of critical thinking questions, social emotional learning questions, and all of that. So it's an amazing, it's a project really close to my heart, because as a kid, I wanted to do something like that. I didn't know at 30 I'll be doing it.
Good sly way of telling everybody how old you are. I think you forgot to mention it's called Ilm Ka Angan.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's called Ilm Ka Angan, the learning courtyard, and it's distributed to around 1,80,000
Okay.
students.
See,
It's
this is how you
180,000
know.
students.
This is how you know I'll be a good host. I remembered the name.
Yeah.
So next time you do.
Yeah.
For people who may not be
Yeah.
aware of TCS, TCS generally serves underserved areas, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's usually in communities where they don't, where children don't have access to a school, or where they don't have access to a good school. And the model is based on community, so the teachers, principals all come from the community.
So when you say we try to lower the dropout rate, what is economics or financial reasons the major reasons for dropout, or do you feel like COVID also added to almost a boredom from students and online learning, which is why they would drop out?
No, so I think it's a mix. It's a mix of several factors. Right after school closed, it was very clear that people, uh, the class of people we serve, were badly hit. And there were also these predictions of, so this many number of schools closing by the end of the year, because they'll not be able to afford just the expenses of running a school.
Mhm.
And also, when there is, in absence of digital avenues, how do you assure your students, or how do you assure your communities that there isn't a huge learning loss, that just the feeling that you're being taken care of, that your school remembers you and your teacher is interested in knowing what you do. So and also the fact that these communities we serve, we assume that a lot of their parents aren't well read, or aren't read at all. So I think creating an engagement and an active engagement at that was very important. Yeah.
And in terms of the TCF philosophy, uh, if I remember correctly, the philosophy is that we want to place some value on education, so it's not free education, but they charge a minimal fee. Is that right?
Yes, they do charge a minimal fee, and I don't remember the, the exact rate of the fee.
I didn't. I
Not very
didn't.
good with numbers.
I didn't expect you to. So the impact the magazine has had, Ilm Ka Angan specifically, what do you think is the impact, or what is the feedback that you've received?
So we did a very thorough survey at the beginning of the when the magazine was launched. The pilot magazine was launched. Throughout the process, now we are in the process of publishing the 10th issue, and we are preparing for another 10 for the next year, because we have been fortunate to get a very generous grant. We are right now in the process of designing and conducting an impact evaluation, but from the anecdotal evidence or from the field reports that we've got, parents and teachers and students are very excited uh, and just excited to have access to high quality content. We had this, so there was a lot of thought that went into the magazine. We created this fictional character by the name of Nadeem Chacha,
Nice.
who answers a lot of mental health questions. So they reported that they related with him. They also like the way teachers also and students like the way that a lot of academic content was done in a very fun manner. So a lot of Android games that students play, educational games. We got an inspiration from that idea and translated that into print. So yeah, the feedback has been overwhelming, and that's why we are continuing to do what we started off.
In case you want more content creators who are comedians and former writers of Burka Avenger and are also mental health advocates, there are a lot of people I can think of. At this point, I feel
Really?
yes, I used to write Burka Avenger and I'm a mental
Oh,
health advocate. At this point, I think I only do quarantines of Fulbrighters to just get jobs out of it, to get gigs out of it. A lot of people who are listening right now in edutech, the entire conversation is around content and engagement, how to create content that's engaging, and the move is towards technology, the move is towards apps. What made you go old school with the philosophy? Is it just meeting people where they are, where they may not have access to that, so till we build that infrastructure they, to ensure that there's no gap? Is it just filling that gap and meeting them where they are, or do you feel there's still a certain generation that will find print a lot more engaging than technology?
if we had it our way, then maybe technology could have been something we were discussing. But the reality is, around 95% of the population we serve, and maybe a similar number, the population in Pakistan, does not have access to like tech gadgets. And even if they do have access to a mobile phone, that mobile phone is usually owned by a male head of the household. How much time is that male parent willing to give his children? So how much time would the
Yes.
parent allow for the children to use that phone? And what if that child is a girl child? So these are lots of things to think about. And right now, especially during COVID, uh, print seemed like an option that we could really reach a lot of people, provide high quality content, provide the like fulfill the objectives we had in mind, at a sort of bare minimum cost. So there was cost. There was also the idea of access. And I'll come to that when you talk to me about the audio support we sent
Yes.
in regional languages. But not a lot of people have access to a mobile phone, and then again, a smartphone with an internet connection.
There's also permanence to print, right? Whereas even if they have the hardware, do they have a smartphone with a high resolution where they are able to actually interact with the app? Even if they have that, do they have the mobile data? Is that mobile data available all day? Is there a limit to that mobile data? Would parents be comfortable with the child using up so much mobile data to engage with something which even some parents may not think is valuable? It is absolutely valuable, but there's also a mindset problem that we need to combat. Since you've already mentioned it, it's a neat segue into the audio files. How are those disseminated?
So the audio file was, and now I'm thinking I forgot to mention a few other like features of our magazine.
Go for it. Go for
But
it.
the so we were very intentional in. I mentioned that earlier as well. The parents of most students are not educated. So for higher grades, we were assuming that the for whatever prompt we give for parental engagement or something that they could discuss with their parents or anyone at home, we had a special icon, and then we wrote something that, and we assumed that the child will be able to read and read to the parent.
Nice.
So that was a that I think was a great feature of the magazine. Audio support file was for readers who, for early years, so students who are not yet ready to read full sentences and a whole story, and also for parents who are then given a way to engage with in the student's academic life. So the audio support was recorded in 6 regional languages, and we disseminated it through WhatsApp. A lot of So we did scripting um, of the of some
Of the
feature or some
scripts.
segments of the yeah
Scripting of the scripts, yes.
scripting of certain segments in the magazine, and then our teachers from within TCF were nice enough to volunteer. They
Nice.
did the recordings, and then we disseminated it through WhatsApp. However, after like certain issues, we got to know that the usage of that is just at 2-5%. The reason being because not a lot of parents have access to a mobile phone, a smartphone, and a smartphone with an internet connection. And then again, even it's a, we so and it was disseminated in the form of a video file where you see a picture where it says Shumara number 4
Mm.
segment, Kahani corner, and Zuban Pashto. And the idea was that the parent will be able to use it. Those parents who were able to use it found it really helpful, but the proportion of those parents is then like a lot less than we anticipated.
Have you
So
have you considered just putting it up on YouTube so that maybe a lot more people can have access to it?
we are thinking of a way where we can we can market the magazine to a wider audience. Right now, it is on the TCF website, but we are thinking about these things now that we are going for the next year.
Especially because I think in regional languages, there's very few good education content which is made in regional languages. So, with all your minds invested in this and working on this, I think it would be a great resource for a lot of people who may not be in conventional schooling as well.
Yeah, you're right. We did start off with a few issues of the Sindhi magazine, and that was really liked. So we are thinking along those lines, but you're right. We must continue to think and act upon that as well.
So, in terms of education, how important do you think it is to make content in regional languages so that people have access to that?
So it's interesting that TCF has just published a very thorough report on education in mother tongue based language, because and there have been several researches on the fact that um, so for a lot of kids, even Urdu is a foreign language. Even Urdu is a language not spoken at home.
As
I
I've
feel like
discovered fighting this battle online, I think we don't question the legacy of Urdu enough in this country.
yeah. So I feel like can you repeat the question again? I've lost my train of
How
thought.
important it is, sorry about interjecting, it's completely my fault. How important it is to make content in regional languages.
I think if the so I the answer to this question would vary. Um, uh, so if you are creating content for a larger audience, and your audience comprises of a lot of people who cannot understand or communicate or engage in as planned in English or Urdu, then you must think about providing content in regional languages. However, if your target audience is a certain class or a certain uh, people who speak a certain language, then create content in the language you want to do. But the idea behind including technology in education is A, to reach a larger audience, and B, is to provide engagement.
Mm.
If you are really thinking about engagement, then I think it's very important to converse or provide that content in a language that's best understood by the audience.
You were also
Yeah.
mentioning the TCF report and the findings for that before I interjected. So if you can just complete that thought for us as well.
Yeah, so they have piloted. We've done a lot of research in the model that students should be initially taught in the mother tongue based language, and then slowly transition to other languages as English and Urdu. And the idea is they've done a lot of research and created a language ladder where you start off in just I think the languages that they are piloting is Mithi, and then by third grade there are some subjects in Urdu, and then by secondary level you are able to learn in Urdu and English. And so there's a lot of research and thought that's been gone into the project. The pilot is being done with her foundation,
Brilliant.
and we are now advocating this. Even when TCF started off as like an Urdu medium schooling system, there was a lot of criticism on that as well. And they've proved a point after 25 years. They have alumni and students doing phenomenal work.
Absolutely.
No way compromising on the quality of the work that's expected of like school students or college students. I think this is the beginning of a new era. I think.
I've seen the TCF in Thar. It's a brilliant project. It's also a beautiful building. It's a large space. Like you talked about spaces, unfortunately, because I live in Karachi, which is an urban center, a lot of the schools are shoved into little houses, which are not the greatest spaces, which would be conducive to learning. So it's very little that we think about the space itself. We think about the architecture itself. Spaces like Lams or Aga Khan or Habib University, or even universities around the world, the reason they're built like that is it creates a space which is also conducive to learning. now that we've been robbed of that space, and you've done a phenomenal job of combating a lot of the ills of the COVID times that we live in. A lot of people listening may be Fulbrighters, a lot of people listening may be working in the field who are interested in education. What would you recommend, that how do they ensure that the loss of learning during COVID with online learning is minimal?
Um, so again, I would say the first thing would be to like to really research around the world, because this is um, it's interesting. I sometimes find comfort in this, and sometimes I get like really worried that this is something that everyone all across the world is dealing with right now. So even the really developed countries, they may be slightly better equipped to deal with this challenge, but this challenge is being faced everywhere. Would really want us to think about um, what are some things that we learned during this pandemic.
Hmm.
So things like mental health really came to the fore, and so teaching in an environment where the focus isn't just to finish that one textbook in this many days, but to really think of how, because the whole year we taught a certain segment of the syllabus and the students were okay. So for the next year, really think of critical topics, maybe think of creating like really realizing that some if a global level um, thing had happened, and acknowledging that, bringing that into the discussions, acknowledging the fact that students, um, there has been a learning loss, and not expecting that now that they'll be in school, it'll be like normal. So transitioning slowly into the routine, and really thinking about, I think, critical topics, diversifying on the techniques, opening up spaces for discussion, however however small they may be. um so yeah.
I think it's beautiful that again we go back to these basic fundamental ideas which we often take for granted, things like empathy, right? Right now there is so much grief and there's so much pain when it comes to students, and because they've not been heard about what their issues are. When universities or schools are making their policies, they're not factoring in things like their mental health. We've all been through a terrible year, and that's clearly taken a toll. So if we stick to what has worked for the past 30 years, despite COVID, despite the global pandemic, despite the circumstances, it just wouldn't work, because it does not factor in that there are individuals at the other end who are going through a terrible time. So whether it be ensuring on campus exams or ensuring the syllabus is covered and the courses are covered, despite the world changing around us, it something like that is bound to fail. So for somebody who studied in the program that you did, how do you think that helped you think about these issues a lot more holistically than maybe a lot of other people who would have said, let's just stick to the same course, stick to the same syllabus, despite it being online? So, how does your Fulbright or your master's program help you think about these things a lot more holistically?
In my personal experience, Fulbright opened up, and it may sound cliched, but really opened up a whole new world to me. Uh, Things as basic as traveling on an airplane. I had never traveled on an airplane. The first plane ride I had was for the Fulbright, and I
Wow.
was scared as hell. But
Do you not have a
just
pre
meeting.
departure orientation?
Yeah, I did have pre-departure reservation, but the plane ride. Okay,
Okay,
so
there was
I
another invention.
the just meeting so many different people from all across the world, um, and conversing with them at a really base level, seeing people who are so passionate to do things but doing things in such diverse ways, and learning from them. I remember in my Fulbright interview I said that even if I so when I come back, I may not have the best solution, but I'll have 10 or 50 solutions to test when I come back. That's exactly what happened. I got a chance to learn from so many people. I got to understand how different people think, how different people perceive problems, how different people perceive issues, um, and yeah. So education for me looked something else. But what does education for other people around the world look like? What
Mhm.
is the goal at the end of a 20-year or 10-year schooling? The perspective on that, the value for education. I think just I think Fulbright and the program really uh, made me reflect and learn and be humble and be ready to accept that I don't know a lot and be ready to learn from others.
These are great.
And knowing that uncertainty will always reside, so it's okay.
All I know is
Yeah.
that I know nothing, Socrates. I think it's always a pleasure talking to Fulbrighters because I know it's a cliche to say it, but the Fulbright experience, that's really what makes you the person that you are. It's not just the education, it's being there, it's going through the process. And clearly, thank you so much that you're doing such phenomenal work and the impact you've created in the community. Again, it's always a pleasure talking to Fulbrighters and learning from them. So thank you so much for joining us, Aksa. And
Thank you, Shehzad.
thank you, everybody,
You
for
have a
listening.
great day ahead.
We'll be back
Yeah.
next week with another Fulbrighter because we're quarantined with Fulbrighters. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.